Wow, are you ready for the word? You know, by the way, just in case you are wondering, I'm wearing a cap because today is Mavuno Kids Funny Heart Sunday. I know it's not funny, but the kids, if your kids were telling me, I'm gonna come, my son came with a helmet. I'm like, what are you guys being taught at Mavuno Kids? Like, I know we are on warfare, but hey, anyway. And so that's why I'm wearing this, just in solidarity with the kids ministry. It's actually a reminder of the crown of thorns that Jesus wore. Come on. I like they're so bright, yeah? And so anyway, so if you see your kids doing that, it's a funny heart Sunday that they're celebrating. Let me start with a question. This is the time you turn to the person seated next to you, whom we otherwise call your neighbor, and discuss that question. And the question for the day today is this. What is something that you valued so much that you are willing to endure any cost, inconvenience, and discomfort rather, to get it? So turn to the person seated next to you and share them with that. If you're seated next to your spouse, I sure do hope the answer is your spouse. Otherwise, you are in trouble. But what is something that you valued so much that you are willing to endure any cost, inconvenience, and discomfort to get it? Turn to the person seated next to you. Discuss that question. 5 marks. Yeah, 5 marks. This is mock exams. Now, let me share with you mine. Mine was when I was finishing high school. As I was finishing high school, I was so convicted that I wanted to gain an experience. And so my friends and I said that we're going to do the Great East African Trek. Not high school, college rather. The Great East African Trek. And so at very weird discomforts, including sleeping in a petrol station, including calling someone we didn't know and asking them to host us for the night, my friends and I actually traveled all the way to Uganda. Then from Uganda, went all the way to Mbarara. We were actually not planning to go. Well, we wanted to go all the way to Kigali, but we didn't have the money. And so we started by going to Uganda. A friend of my sister's hosted us. And then he told us, Mbarara is not so far. If you have been to Uganda on the way to Kigali, it's like 5 hours, 6 hours away. So we have a friend in Mbarara, and so we went there. He hosted us for literally an afternoon. We showered. And then he told us, Kigali is actually not so far. It's like 6 hours again, 5 hours again from here. And so, and then he said the buses pass over here at around 9 p.m. And so we shower, we eat. 9 p.m. we're in the bus stop. You guys, the buses came at 4 a.m. So we literally slept on a bench at the petrol station and then went all the way to Kigali and realized, unlike Mbarara, we actually didn't have a host. And so we called my sister because my sister knows someone somewhere. And so we call, my sister is one of those. If you're in South Africa, you don't know where to go, call me. I'll call my sister. She'll tell you who in South Africa will host you. And so we called my sister. Sure enough, she says there's a guy in a church. He's called Mark Gwamaka. Go there and say that I sent you and he'll host you. So boom, we go to this church. It's on a Monday. Church is just about to be closed. We show up. And we say, sorry, we introduce ourselves. We are students from Kenya. We are here to see business opportunities, lies. And then we tell the guy, do you have Mark Gwamaka? So the guy says, I don't have Mark Gwamaka's number, but call this number and ask them for Mark's number. So I call, I'm the only one who had credit, thank God. And so I call, and actually only my phone had charge. That back then it was a Nokia something. And so of course it had charge. And so I call this guy and say, do you have Mark's number? He says, of course, I got you. He sends me Mark's number. I call the guy, I call Mark, I'm like, I was sent by my sister, can I come over? The guy's not understanding. He says, I don't stay far from the church. Come to the church. We go to the church, we are relaxed, we are so refreshed, we sit on the couches, like this is so amazing. Then I ask him, so how do you know my sister? And the guy says, I don't know your sister. I'm like, are you not Mark? He says, I am Max. So when I call and say, do you have Mark's number? He didn't have Mark, he gave me Max. So I'm like, okay, so here's the deal. We are students from Kenya, we are here for exploration, blah, 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 blah. The guy ended up hosting us for 2 nights. Today I'm alive because of that guy. I really just wanted to gain an experience. So it's not a thing, but an experience. And genuinely, we're willing to pay any cost, whatever it took, for us to actually gain that experience. The next year, we said that we were going to go to Ethiopia through Kapenguri and stuff. I reached Eldoret, I visited Pastor Faith's house, and I came back. Now I have a wife, praise the Lord. For those who are joining us today, we have been going through a sermon series called Unlikely Candidates. And we're looking at the life of Paul, who was one of the most influential leaders in, Christian history, probably one, history as well, in terms of the impact he's had, not just in the Christian circles, but in our social life as well. And how God used him to do extraordinary things as an ordinary candidate, as an unlikely candidate rather. If you've missed the last 4 weeks of this teaching, I'd like to encourage you to go to our Downtown YouTube page and just imbibe, connect with that content. I truly believe that God has been feeding us a good word over here. Last week, I talked to you about and asked you whether you'll be part of the future. And I want us to go through today. Today now, yes, most of you said, I want to be part of the future, or most of you are thinking through it. Now, today's sermon will either make you know what you signed up for, or it will make you quit. And so I want you to know, I want you to understand the fine print of what it will cost you to actually welcome that great future. You're going to be going through the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23 to 28. Basically, Paul is the unlikely candidate. He's ended up becoming one of the most influential leaders of all time. And the reason why he was able to do that is because he understood what it meant to pay the cost for something that he believed in. Like many would imagine, following Jesus didn't make life easy for him. In fact, from a perspective, you can say that following Jesus made things harder for him. It made things hard for him that after he started following Jesus than it was before he started following Jesus. The passage you're about to read describes some of the things that happens in Paul's life as a direct reaction of that decision for him to follow Jesus. Verse 23 of 2 Corinthians chapter 11 says this. So it's basically Paul is sort of defending his credential as an apostle. And he says, are they servants of Christ? I know I sound like a madman, but I have served far more. I have worked harder, been in prison more often, been whipped times without number, and faced death again and again. Just hold it there, media team. Because this is just the first verse. And he's already going into his resume of what makes him qualified to be a servant. And he said, I've been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, faced death again and again. What a shock. Somebody gotta be crazy. Somebody gotta be crazy. Can you imagine? And then the next details, he now gives us the blow-by-blow account of how these things happen. Verse 25 says this, 5 times the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was whipped. Once I spent a whole night and a day adrift at sea. I have traveled on many long journeys. I have faced danger from rivers and from robbers. I have faced danger from my own people, the Jews, as well as from the Gentiles. I have faced danger in the cities, in the desert, and on the seas. I have faced danger from men who claim to be believers, but I'm not. I have worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I have been hungry and thirsty. I have often gone without food. I have shivered in the cold without enough clothing to keep me warm. Then besides all this, I have daily the burden of my concern for all the churches. What a wow. Can you imagine defending? This is why I'm an associate of Mavuno Downtown. I have been flogged. I have been beaten. Can you imagine? This is what he's trying to say. This is what he's trying to say. Paul is describing the challenges that he faced, not because he had done the wrong things, but because he had chosen to do the good thing. He had chosen to follow Jesus. Somebody gotta be crazy. And with a scorecard like this, you would not have blamed Paul for giving up. You would not have blamed Paul. These are many challenges for any one of us to bear. I mean, just pick any one of those things. Verse 25, for example. And you go there and you look at the things that happened to Paul. Verse 25. He says, 3 times have been beaten with the rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole... This is crazy stuff for anyone to go. Sindio. By the time you're being beaten once, you're like, okay, sawa. They made a mistake. Second time, you're like, God, where were you? That time, you were forsaken. This guy went through it 3 times. Look at that. Once I was stoned. And of course, USIU students here is not stoned for puff, puff, pass. It's koof, koof, dead. Yeah? Because some of you are like, wow, just once. No, it's like it was bad, all right? 3 times I was shipwrecked. And this is like a real ship going down. You know, some of us, we face a shipwreck in our relationship and we stop coming to church, we stop leading the DG, we stop serving, we stop giving, we stop coming for morning prayers because, God, where are you? Just because of a relationship. This was like your Titanic. You are Titanic. And you wake up and you continue preaching. Yeah. You've been broken up by a text. You're like, God, at least you should have taken me to Java and broken. Should I continue or should I stop? Somebody gotta be crazy. Oh, yes. And the reality is that most of us, is that if you go through even half of what Paul is going through, you are like, hasta la vista, daddy. I'm born again, but this is serious. I mean, what are you talking about, God? What are you saying? Like, me, go again after that. You give up. Yet for some of us, sometimes it's not even this thing. Sometimes it's that you go through a financial shipwreck. God, where were you? I was showing up for morning prayers. I was coming for service when everyone else is sleeping. And you give up. You give up on God. You and I, we want to grow in our faith. We want to attempt big things for God. We want to impact lives for generation. We want to be present, to represent rather God in our generation. We want to set up our kids to have a shot at being believers in their generation. But here's the deal, guys. Fearless living will cost you. Oh, yes. You will never be everything God created you to be if you just come to church on Sunday morning. And when it's raining, you don't come, you catch us online. No. You'll never, I know I brought violence, but you'll never be everything God created you to be by just shouting, you are the fearless. If you want to attempt big things for God, you got to know this, friends. Opposition is already against you. In fact, Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12, that in fact, if everyone who wants to live a godly life in union with Christ will be persecuted. Not maybe persecuted, not perhaps will be. The moment you say, I want to do fearless things for my generation, you will be persecuted. It's a declaration of fact. It's an invitation to that consideration. Would you consider this? You will be persecuted. You want to attempt big things for God? Then get ready, friends. You will face challenges. It's part of the deal. Sometimes someone says, Pasi, since I started serving in church, this and this is happening. Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, bruh, it's according to plan. You are on track. Stop thinking that you and the person who's not born again will live the same kind of lives. First of all, when you are paid, you are already working at 9 out of 10. They are working with 10 out of 10 because you are to tithe. Yeah? By the time you are resting them, they have Sunday to rest. You have to show up in church and serve. Stop thinking that you will run at the same pace with your friends. I went to college with some friends. Today they are living lives that I can only admire from afar. I have realized this. As long as I'm serving in church, in a physical sense, we will never be at par. I did computer science. The guys that we went with, wanaendelea vizuri. Pastor Kendi over here told me how her friend went to a showroom and chomoka with a new car. Praise the Lord. We are still praying, sister, have you given your first fruits? You will, Kendi, as long as you've chosen to serve God, you will not be at the same level with your friends in this life. Yeah. There's always be someone else to compare who's doing much better, because persecution is part of the package that you take up the moment you choose to do this. And I have to teach you guys this, otherwise you'll shrivel and wrinkle and wither in the face of temptation and trials. Because nothing has the capacity to invite troubles and persecution your way as a clear call from God, as a clear word from God. Matthew chapter 13. Matthew 13 says this. But since this is that parable of the sower, and Jesus is giving different stories, and one of them falls on rocky ground, and Jesus says, but since they have no root, they last only a short time when trouble and persecution comes because of the word. There is something that attracts trouble your way because of the word. And so the moment you came to church and God gave you a clear word on your marriage, God gave you a clear word on your finances, God gave you a clear call on your word, that word by itself attracts trouble. So the problem is that it's not that the word didn't build up faith. Faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. The problem is that you didn't have resilient faith. Faith was built, that's why you started going, but you didn't have resilient faith to withstand persecution that comes because of the word. And so we are here to say today, and I want to share with you that every great goal requires great sacrifice. Because if you don't believe that, you will wither in the face of trouble. Unlikely, yes. Empowered, yes. But then you need to realize that the cost is not an easy life. It's not hunky-dory. It's not comfort and convenience. You will face many troubles. Many troubles. You will get into a relationship. And while your friends can do all that appertains, for you, you have to remain pure until marriage. Trouble. And they will laugh at you wondering, are you straight? Are you sure you love each other? Trouble. You will have to persevere that. If you're not ready, you will fall for the temptation because everyone else is doing it. Am I preaching to somebody? Somebody got to be crazy. Somebody got to die. It's true. Every great goal requires great sacrifice. Let me tell you guys, Jesus knew that. Come on, somebody. Jesus knew that. That's the whole point of the Easter holiday. Easter is a big reminder that every great goal requires great sacrifice. And our Master not only led the way, our Master not only shows us the way, but our Master invites us into that life of sacrifice. Now pay attention, I don't want to lose you. Why does God invite us to sacrifice greatly? Why does God invite us to sacrifice our comfort, our convenience, our sleep, our resources, our very lives? Why does God invite us to do this? Consider this story that Jesus gives in the book of John chapter 12, verse 23-25. This is a time when Jesus is nearing his crucifixion. And so he's talking to his boys. And he tells them this in verse 23 all the way, I think, to 20. We'll read all to 25 or something like that. He says, Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of God to be what? Come on, guys, to be what? To be glorified. Verse 24 says this, very, very, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. It produces many seeds. Anyone who loves their life will lose it. And anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Why does Jesus invite us to live a life of sacrifice? Why does Jesus himself sacrifice himself greatly for our sake? I want to give us 4 reasons why every one of us should desire, in fact, should live a life of sacrifice. The book of, I think it's James says, James chapter 1 or something like that says, count it pure joy when you go through trials and temptations of many kinds. Number 1, the reason why you should sacrifice greatly is because sacrifice releases power and glory. Come on, somebody. The Bible says, Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. The hour that Jesus is talking about is not his resurrection, it is his crucifixion. Yet in the crucifixion, he says, the hour has come to be glorified. Come on, somebody. He sees, he knows that the event that is taking place is the crucifixion, but the reality of the moment is the release of glory and power. Even the power that offers your salvation was impossible without that crucifixion. And so the moment of crucifixion was also the moment of glory. It's like for us, it's the sacrifice of the gym and the training field that gives you the glory of the award ceremony. It's the agony of the library for students that gives you the glory of that first class. It's the same thing. You are going through a crucifixion, but in that crucifixion is a release of power. Power, the power that raised Christ from the dead was always available. The power that brought our salvation was always available, but it was released through sacrifice. And for some of you, the thing that you need to do is already with you. The problem that you don't want to go through sacrifice. Now, here's the deal, guys. Jesus had already been offered that glory. Remember when he's been tempted at the beginning of his ministry and the devil says, worship me and I'll give you all this. It's all this that Jesus had come for. But he says, depart from me, worship the Lord alone. But he also knew this. If I get that glory without the cross, it's going to destroy me. Come on, somebody. It's going to destroy you. We've all seen when someone gets the glory without the cross and they go through a destruction. Some of you who are parents here know that you cannot give your child $1 million or whatever. You cannot give even 10K. You can't just give them $4 because you know this money will destroy you. Because you've not been able to go through the cross of being able to learn how to handle the resource. Yet there are some people here today, you give them $1 million, they'll still continue working well. Because the money is not going to destroy them. They've already gone through the cross of financial management. Some of us today, you are in church, thank God, because you're broke. The day you penya like this, I'm jogging in Karura, my dog needs to need, you are like, hey. You receive glory without the cross. But some of you, you've been trained in the crucible of the cross. Money cannot change you. A relationship cannot change you. Nothing can change you because you know that, oh, come on, somebody. You hang in there on the cross until the cross is done with its work, until perseverance finishes its work. Come on, somebody. Somebody gotta die. Let me tell you, even the king, even the other kingdom knows that power is released through sacrifice. Yeah, and the greater the cost, the greater the power. The more impossible the cost, the greater the power. That's why you'll find someone looking for a pink chicken with a blue tail and one leg. They look for it and take it to that guy because they know once this is sacrificed, people will give family members because once this is done, power is released. That's the other kingdom. Now for us, Jesus, the Son of God, come on somebody. How much power do you think is available for you? That is, God himself gave his life for you. And then he invites you to walk in the same nature. Because power and glory is released through sacrifice. Number 2. Now, if you don't want number 2, I can also just go to number 4. Do you want number 2? Because number 2 is powerful. In fact, I'm not sure you're ready for number 2. Guys on this side, are you ready for number 2? Because I can share with these guys and hopefully you take notes as well. Are you sure, Kendi? All right, number 2, sacrifice releases life. Sacrifice releases life. Verse 24 says this, very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Here's the deal, guys. The genius of God is that he created every living thing, whether it's plants, animals, birds, fish, every living thing. He created it with the capacity to produce after its kind. All right? But that only happens when the parent chooses to die. Life is not released any other way unless someone is choosing to die. It's the death that is happening. It's the pain. It's a sacrifice of the maternity room that causes the cries and the joys of the nursery care. Unless somebody is dying in the maternity ward, nobody is living in the maternity care, in the nursery care. Women here know that if you choose to remain, prim and proper with your curves and makeup, nobody is giving birth. But it's that discomfort that releases life. It's that discomfort that produces life. And as it is in the natural, so it is in the spiritual. If you ain't dying in the spiritual, nobody's been given, no life is being produced. This is what Paul says in the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 11 and 12 says this. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake. So that his life may also be revealed in our mortal bodies. Watch verse 12. So then, death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. Come on, somebody. Death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. And so you want to be used greatly for God in your generation. The question is death at work in you so that life can work in your whatever space that you are in? And so because sacrifice releases life, every great goal requires great sacrifice. We cannot raise a strong church without great sacrifice on our part. If the DG leader is not willing to die to my privacy, my house, my space, my time, my resources, forget that DG, it's dead. Because death must work in you. So do you think Riga and the team just came on stage and all of a sudden everyone knows what key they should be in? The guys died on Tuesday, they died on Thursday, they died on Saturday while we were all enjoying our Easter holiday. They were dying so that life could then come and work. That's why sometimes I say, even if they hit a wrong note, I'm dancing through it because I know they worked hard for it. Some of you are like, they're not singing for you. They're singing to God in your presence. Thank God you are there. So you use that as a music bed and you worship your king regardless. Because you're like, ain't nothing coming between me and the worship of my king. If God died for you, sometimes it's like we're being forced to worship God. If God, did he die for you? And if he died, then worship him with all you have. Death work in him so that life can work in you. That's the reality of everything, guys. If members of the discipleship group are not willing to die, forget the missional community. Because everyone will remain there. Somebody gotta die, go out and plant a new discipleship group. And to the degree you're willing to die, it's the degree that the thing you're leading will live. Oh, yes. You can tell, let me not go there, but should I go there? Yeah, let me go there. Let me help you. You can tell how much will come out of these kids based on how much the parents are dying. Oh, yes. The more you can tell how much will come out of your career based on how much you're dying to eat. So your career will progress because you are dying daily to eat. You're showing up, you're doing the thing. But you must choose to die to your kids, comfort and convenience to be there so that they can have a shot at life. You can tell how much a marriage will do based on how much the couples are dying. So the husband has got to die, the wife has got to die through submission. Both are dying, it's just at different levels. So now the beauty is this, you who's hearing this, you die. Don't say, my husband should be here to hear this, or my wife should be here to, you die, you. Because you are the one I'm preaching to. If the Lord wanted them to hear this message, they would have been here today. The best you can do is say, rewatch this content with me, but you're going to die. Why? Because every great goal requires great sacrifice. Number 3, sacrifice leads to multiplication. That same verse 24 says, it's very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Sacrifice leads to multiplication. When a woman dies to self, there is multiplication in the family. When a man dies to their own comfort and conveniences, you're not gambling all your money, there's multiplication in the family. When the children die to self, there's growth, there's multiplication. They are able to get much more from their parents as well. Discipleship group leaders, listen to me. Your DG will die a natural death if your members are not going to die too. I like this DG because we know each other mentality. You gotta die. You got to say, we know each other, but I'm sending you out. Otherwise, every discipleship group, every life group that refused to send out members to plant new DGs, it died. It's a statistic. Somebody has to move out of the familiarity of the group and plant a new thing. The reason why Mavuno Ruaka, Mavuno Wayakiwe Swahili, Mavuno Lavington, Mavuno West Park, Mavuno Meru, Mavuno, which other one am I forget? Kitale. The reason why those churches exist is because Mavuno Downtown chose to die to good services, we chose to die to good preachers. Pastor Nyamu and Pastor Mugambi were my amazing services pastors. With them leading, I never had to think through anything. Now, I have to teach Sule back the basics of running a service. But he's amazing. Come on, let's celebrate Sule. He's doing an amazing job. This is my services pastor over here. But I have to go back to teach him, Sule, now this screen must work because when it's not working, but Pastor Mugambi knew. Pastor Korea, running Mavuno Lavington, he was my second preaching pastor. Now I have to go back and tell my wife, babe, you and I have to preach. And she does a good job. Can we just celebrate Pastor Faith? But Pastor Korea, I could go for 5 weeks. The man is teaching. Now I'm going back teaching. Now guys are doing a good job. I'm not saying anything. But I had to die to having a good preacher in the church so they can live. Oh yes. What? If you ain't dying, there is no multiplication. We will not see hidden treasures unless there is sacrifice being offered. Oh yes. Oh yes. Number 4, finally, sacrifice ensures continuity. Verse 25 says this, anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. It always humbles me to realize that this church continues to exist because some people sacrificed. We continue as Mavuno Downtown because Pastor Kiama and Mrs. K, they sacrificed. You guys don't know this, but for a season, they went without a salary so that this church could exist. How can we not enjoy? Pastor BX and Mrs. Becky, These were the second campus pastors of this church. Great sacrifice on their part to ensure that this church continues to exist. If I tell you the things that Pastor BX sacrificed just for this church to have a shot at continuity. Pastor Kevin Derito and Lucy Derito, generals. When you see them around, because they're going to be coming for the Downtown at 18 celebration, yeah? June 21st, July 21st, keep the date open. Generals. When they came, the church, first of all, was like halved. Different people didn't want their leadership, but they travailed, they pushed on. In their season, the church grew. The church, we planted our first church plant under them. The church was doing very well financially, growth and but it came at a sacrifice. And these are just the leaders that are up front. There are many people who paved the way for Riga today to sing. It's because someone called Osai paid the cost. Someone called Webby paid the cost. Someone called Pastor Karemi paid the cost. We are continuing to build. Now, if they were wishy-washy, they were, heavy in their giving, this church would have closed. But because of their sacrifice, there is continuity to today. So we cannot be wishy-washy in our giving because your kids need to find a place they can call church. If there's anything to change, if there's anything to work on, we fold our sleeves, we get to work because our sacrifice will ensure continuity. When you bounce, when you leave church, your child will go there, maybe not connect. One day they'll come back to downtown, but you're closed. Because we couldn't fold our sleeves and serve. Sacrifice ensures propagation, ensures the next generation gets it, ensures, something comes up through our giving, through our serving, through our planting DJs, through our planting other churches. Continuity. Do you know that if Mavuno Downtown was closed today, by next Sunday, we'll tell each of you where to go for church? There are some of you guys go to Lavington, they have space. You guys go to Mavuno Ruaka. You guys go to Wayakiwe. Some of you meet in your discipleship groups. But if those churches were not planted, even me, I'd wonder where I'll go. But because of that sacrifice and planting, we have continuity and we have resilience. Am I making sense? We have resilience. It's Pastor Sai who tells his three kids, you guys stop fighting because you're only 3 of you. If one of you dies now, I remain with 2. If you were 10, I would allow you to fight. Because there's continuity. But if you are 2, that's the idea. Of course, we've talked in the past about primary sacrifice and secondary sacrifice. I won't go into that today, but the primary sacrifice that God is asking you to give is your very life. You see, sometimes we can, focus on secondary sacrifices. We can focus on giving and tithing and whatever, but the Lord is inviting you to give the primary sacrifice of your life. Galatians 2:20 says this, I've been crucified with Christ, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live now in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Every great goal requires great sacrifice. When you give your life, when you lay your life at the altar, all these other things start flowing from that. But you can tell you've not put your life on the line because then complaining becomes part of the equation. Why are we going for gatherings? Why should I serve? Why should I be part of a discipleship group? Why should we meet for overnight leaders night, which is coming up next week on Friday? Come on, leaders night. Oh yes, we're having an overnight leaders night on Friday. It's a kesha for leaders. So if you want to serve in church, if you want to volunteer in church, come for that one. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 8:5, that they exceeded our expectation. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. If you want all these things to flow, then you give your life first of all to the Lord. Then by the will of God, you start giving all these other secondary sacrifices. I want to finish, of course our time is up. But I want to ask you this question. What part will you play in this adventure? What stake will you claim in Mavuno's story? Somebody sacrificed for you to be here today. What are you willing to sacrifice for others to be blessed in the next 10 years? Because every great goal requires great sacrifice.